Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Developing the Leader Within. Today, I have a special guest, and I am so fortunate to have him, MJ Tolan. He's a TedX speaker. He's an author of a great book called Executive Powers. He's a vacation rental evangelist. He's an entrepreneur and a businessman. And we're going to be talking about leadership and teams today. MJ, thank you for being on the show.
Awesome to be here. Let's rock and roll.
Outstanding. So before we get into the book and respect, right? Because that's the framework of what we're going to talk about in terms of leadership and teams. Can you take us a couple of minutes to tell us about yourself?
Well, yeah, I'm going to be talking about leadership. And yes, I did write a book about leadership called Executive Powers. But in the foreword of my book, I confess that I'm a reformed leader. That means that I've made every leadership mistake possible. I had probably when I was a young executive, I was the number one client for the local florist because I was constantly having to buy flowers to deliver to the secretaries and apologize for stepping on their toes or their egos. So, yeah, I was a really, really slow learner. And of course, I built teams over the years. And sometimes I learned, sometimes I forgot. But at the end of the day, I realized that, leadership in itself, such a big topic. That's why I wrote about it. We'll get into that and we'll unpack that in this session. But my experience has been to open businesses, and I have the opportunity, pleasure, and privilege to live and work in over 12 countries around the world. And that has given me a totally different lens perspective because sometimes, leadership behaviors and practices are one thing and getting the communication out is another. And very often, through translation and sometimes poor translation, things didn't come off so well. So we had to really adapt and make sure that we were communicating that anchoring of those leadership practices to teams who could not normally speak English.
Yes, and me being bilingual, I can understand there's some things that just don't translate. And as a leader, you have to be careful on how you execute those words and how they translate. In your book, Executive Powers, I love the acronym RESPECT, the word, and how you dissect those things. And R stands for respect. And I love that you started with that and you tied it right into the actual word. How does respect come to play in terms of leadership?
I like to think that nobody knows you. So if nobody knows you, then you're going to have to win the rapport. And you're going to do that with one of two ways. You're either going to bark at them, which is going to chase them away, or you're going to attract them. And if you attract them with a respectful heart, you're going to get a lot more attention and a lot more glue to that potential relationship. Somebody asked me once, because they had just been promoted and they said, now that I'm senior vice president of this Fortune 500 company, I don't have to do this, this, and this. I have somebody else doing that for me. And I kind of thought to myself, oh my gosh, this guy has a whole different concept of what leadership really should be. Because at the end of the day, the first thing that a leader has to do is look at himself in the mirror and said, I have the privilege to be able to go and serve people today. I have the privilege to be able to make their life better, to make my company, my offering better. And let's see how I can use all the skills that I brought with me today that I learned from yesterday and years before into this moment so that I can serve. And by doing that, I'll do that with respect. And respect is it's like an ATM card. So if you don't have anything in the bank, nothing going to come out. You've got to put the respect in first to be able to withdraw and expect respect from other people. So don't go into a room, I'm the senior vice president, you must respect me. Well, that kind of old school is long gone. So I truly believe that respect is the first place to start.
Oh, wow. That's wonderful. I totally agree with you on that. And I've seen both sides of that, let's say ATM withdrawal, right? So I've seen somebody swipe that card thinking there was something there and they were disappointed. And it is really sad to see those things play out. uh, because a leader has this, as you said, right? The blessing, the honor, the charge of other people, and when they really cherish it, they understand respect is something, like you just said, that you deposit in first before you try to make a withdrawal. Energy is part of a team's dynamic, and we're focusing on teams. And how does a leader bring that energy?
Well, first of all, to be ignited yourself.
Mm,
So if a leader understands their purpose, if they understand their mission, then the passion will flow. And when that flows, they will energize themselves and other people. And it doesn't have to be a Tony Robbins session. It's just that there's an acute awareness. There's a laser-like focus. It can be disseminated and distributed through comedy. It can be distributed through praise. It can be distributed through all kinds of other channels. But the main aim, of course, is that if you're energized, you can energize other people. A dead balloon with no air is not going to fly. So you've got to bring the oxygen. You've got to bring the momentum. And you do that just by bringing yourself and letting other people know what our purpose is, and then empowering them to be part of that purpose and part of that grand purpose. And when people feel part of what you have represented yourself as powerful or dominant, or not even that, maybe passive and sweet, whatever your style is, at the end of the day, when they feel that you're energized yourself, it's easier for you to be able to impact them. A candle can light another candle.
wonderful. Wow, man. You mentioned self, and we're going through the respect, right? And self is so important with leadership. I've been trying to say that for years now, right? It truly begins with self, doesn't it?
Well, it does. I mean, at the end of the day, when you have to look in the mirror in the morning, and you're looking at the leader. And that is the person that everyone else is going to look up to. If you're not prepared when you walk out of that house or wherever you are, if you're going to be kicking the can down the street, then you're going to lose a great opportunity. So when people look at, monkey see, monkey do, if you're not able to walk the walk that you're asking other people to with your talk, then you're going to lose instant respect. So it's leaders who have the ability, the discipline, the awareness that they themselves have to toe the line, that they themselves have to set the example. And it's not just 9 to 5. It's a constant lifestyle. It's a constant injection of the characteristics, practices, and purpose that a leader brings to the table. So self-leadership starts with self-discipline, self-awareness, and self-purpose.
Amazing. I've, we hear about this all the time. And a couple of weeks ago, I had mentioned, you can't give what you don't have. And most of the time there is, because leadership can be tricked, right? You can act a couple of parts, in your playing of a leader. But the fact is, at the end of the day, people know whether you are or not. And so the only person you're fooling is yourself, because you must bring self. You must bring that energy. Like you said, we're talking about Energize. You must bring all that. And I totally agree with you in that regard. When it comes to team dynamics, and we've kind of mentioned leadership as a core, yourself. Now we get into these teams, and the dynamic changes, right? Because you have all kinds of selves in that group, and they're bringing their own flavor and things. There are occasions for correction, and there are occasions for praise. How do you feel about praises, right? Because P stands for praises.
Well, yeah, it's in my model, and it's there for a reason. It's so important to understand the fundamentals of the human sponge, because they can soak in sugar and they can bruise easily. Everyone that I've ever met who whether they read any, the great Dale Carnegie books that are out there. They can remember back in school when the teacher had asked them a question and they didn't know the answer and they were made to feel silly or embarrassed or bad shamed in front of all their peers. That's traumatic, and people grow up with these traumas, and sometimes even because of those, if you ask people, what's their biggest fear, some of them will tell you it's a snake, or some of them will tell you it's an elevator. A lot of them, actually, if you drill down, it's public speaking because of the fear of being criticized or ostracized. So when we talk about this and we turn the lens turn it to praise, well, that's really important, because think about your kids. I was with someone recently. They had two children they were talking about. One was getting lots of praise, one was getting lots of criticism. And they were, having this debate. And you could see right away that maybe, just maybe, if you step back and look at people as they are, people really don't want to be made to feel bad. And the days of Jackie Gleason, there was an old show that my father used to watch on TV, and we would all cuddle around the TV. And they would have this kick the trash can kind of leadership, where the boss would come in and say, who parked their car in my slot, and start ripping things over the office. And in 4 minutes, the entire office staff were shaking and fearful and whatever. Well, what would that do to a team who was just on the verge of winning a particular sales cycle? So no, praise is public, and criticism, if at all, has to be in private and then done in a very specific way. It's not you. It is your privilege as a leader, and it is your purpose as a leader to hold the heart of a human being very gently. And when you do that, you have to know that you have the power right there to make this person from good to great, or to degrade yourself and ruin his moment and possibly trauma in the future. So absolutely, in the respect model, praise, praise, praise. Make sure that you give people more credit as much as you can, because wow, people really want to get back to the office and get it again. And maybe if they perform again, they're going to get it again. It's that's how it goes. So you know what? And I tell people say, well, MJ, can you come in and show our company how we can improve performance? We don't really have a budget, but we'll spend budget. And then I look at their reward system they have for their employees, a recognition system they have for their employees. And I see the behavior that they have with their employees, and I kind of go to myself before I go to them. I go, how can I communicate this gently, that if they continue to do what they're doing with their employees, they're going to continue to have this attrition rate where people are just going through the revolving door and they're feeding the competition's HR department, because that's why they're losing people. They're just not treating them respectfully enough.
Oh, I absolutely love that. And specifically, when you mentioned the heart, right? If you can just visualize every team member heart in your hand, it's a very delicate, it's an honor. It's just a straight honor to hold people's heart in your hand, and that's what you do in leadership. And what I love about praises and how you mention it is that it actually feeds into your next, E, which is enable, enabling your people to succeed, to become active members of that team. So I would love to hear your take on that, on enablement.
I think, it comes to the point where you know that there are micromanagers, and you think back, leadership, people learned leadership. Leadership is something they've learned from their childhood. Again, their parents were their first leaders. Their teachers were their first leaders. How did they respond? You had some rebels and you have some children who were more compliant. But as life develops, leadership is a whole different concept to them today. And yet it's ribbed with those early markers. So we have to be very, very careful to know that people don't like to be micromanaged. So don't. If they have the skill sets and the experience, or they have the mentoring that they need, let them get on with it. Enable them. Give them the impetus. Give them the opportunity to be able to make their own bonfire, so that they in turn can invite everyone into their achievement and say, here guys, here's what I've done. So the more opportunities you have as a leader, and this is the difference between leader boss philosophy, the more chances you have as a leader to empower, to enable your team members to be able to get on with what they do, deliver what they do, and see them grow and prosper as if it's their own business. You know, there's so many opportunities within organizations. We talk about entrepreneurship, and of course, you know, I do a lot of work with small to medium-sized enterprises and startups, et cetera. But when it really comes down to a bigger organization, and I would be asked to come in and do a treatment, you know, for a period of time, you know, I would start with these fundamentals, and I would start with, you know, how are we as an organization empowering and enabling all of our people? Do they feel like there's a chance for them to grow? Do they feel that the company cares about their education? Are they offering anything that would give them more skill sets so that this job or this role becomes a bigger part of their life and becomes even bigger than they thought, because now they can be empowered and enabled by the leadership within the company. That's just gold.
Yes, I absolutely love that. There's nothing better than enabling your team. And you mentioned their home bonfire. I love it because, you know, sometimes leaders, they think that the fire that's going is theirs, and it's actually your team generating that fire. And so when we enable them to do those things and create their own bonfires, we're actually creating new leaders, right?
Oh, absolutely. There are too many bosses again who want to hold on to the information, who want to repress enthusiasm, who want to put down anybody with any new ideas that didn't come from them because of their own feeling of, well, inadequacy, because of their own fear of, how did I get in this position? I hope nobody ever discovers how inadequate I am. I don't want any of my team members to come up with a better idea. And that, of course, costs companies tons of turnover, revenue, opportunities. So I believe that, yeah, a leader's responsibility is to pollinate within the organization. And you know what? When we talk about leadership, we're not just talking about position. I've had so many opportunities within my own organizations. I'll give you one example. I flew into one of my offices years ago. I'm talking a million years ago. And I asked where was the manager? Well, the manager was at a dental appointment, so he didn't expect me to fly into the country that day. Okay, well, where is the so-and-so? Oh, I don't know where that is. The only person that knows where that is so-and-so. Okay, well, but where's the reports about, oh, well, the only person who knows about that is so-and-so, the same so-and-so. And after 4 or 5 questions, it was the same so-and-so. And I said, who is that? She said, well, she doesn't really have a title, but just everybody goes to her for, well, she was the leader. And she was in an administrative position. And yet, through somehow, some kind of a tribal uplifting of how she had approached people with empathy, and she had approached them with goodwill, she had become ipso facto a tribal leader within the organization without a title. So you don't have to have a title. In fact, one of the greatest lessons I had, you know, I've had the opportunity to be, you know, involved in seminars from, you know, every corner of the earth, from every speaker, including Zig Ziglar, you know, one of my great favorites. But I spent a few times, I'd gone out with Deepak Chopra. I really needed that zen in my life. And one of the things I came out of San Diego, one of the Lake Tahoe conferences actually, was people are neither their positions or their possessions. So if they're neither their positions or their possessions, who are they? They're not their business card. So who are they? And then, of course, continuing to ask this question in the seminar, you kind of turn around and have to say, I'm a person, and I have feelings, and I have kids, and okay, so now we're getting somewhere. So when it comes down to leadership, leadership is for everyone. My mother was the classic leader, you know, 8 boys, 8 sons that she had. How could she not be, you know, my role model, or my grandmother for great leadership? You know, you learned it, right? And that's where we learned. A lot of people learned leadership in the wrong way, and we had bad examples and bad role models. Or we watched television, which gave us a different kind of leadership style, depending on the era that we grew up with. Today, wow, leadership is for everyone, and the privilege of today's leaders are to be able to encourage and enable to grow leadership skills within their organizations. Wow, guess what you have now? Now you have what George Bush said years ago, 1,000 beams of light, 1,000 points of light. You have all these people within your organization, all individual leaders, and you can just see that emanating out. So grow leaders whatever chance you have to do that, do it constantly.
I love that story because it highlights the true essence of what a leader does in that the lady that you just spoke about. She undoubtedly built an environment around her of trust. They went to her. And that's funny, right? Because no titles, but a true leader infuses, it actually generates trust of the people around them. What can you tell us about that?
It's the hardest thing to earn and the easiest thing to lose. It is something that you constantly work at. There's no replacement for investing in people, the trust in people, and giving them the opportunity to know that you are trustworthy. And trustworthy doesn't really mean anything else except this. I can define leadership in this very simple way. Now, you can see that this is a watch. You can't see the brand. It doesn't matter. But I can tell you something about this watch. It tells time. Now, from a leadership perspective, whether you have a Rolex or a Timex, the most important part about the watch, forgetting that it tells time, is it's reliable. When it becomes reliable, that means it's consistent. When it becomes reliable and consistent, that means you can count on it. And when it becomes all those three, you're a trustworthy leader.
Amazing. Amazing. I love it. You know, I love how you started with respect, although the acronym, but the word, you started with respect and you ended with trust, because literally that's capstoning, right? You're putting the end and the ends on what the essence of leadership is, to generate and attract respect from others, energizing your team, being a self-leader, giving praise when the praise needs to be given, and doing it publicly. I'm also of the thought that, hey, you need to correct. Okay, those times come, but make sure you do that in a private scene where you can garner more respect. Because this is funny, right? It all feeds back to each other, enabling your team to succeed, and in all of those things, creating new leaders and just creating an avenue for trust to flourish, and where people see you as that watch, right? That three-prong watch that they can count on. MJ, I have just utterly enjoyed this conversation, hearing you talk, and I want the listeners to be able to do the same. How can they get a hold of you?
Well, follow me on Twitter. I'm MJ Tolan, at MJ Tolan. Also, our website is World Class Institute, worldclassinstitute.net. So that's another way to get in touch. And obviously, I'm a big driver on LinkedIn. So I'm an open networker. Come in, get in touch. Let's see how we can help each other. How we can spread the good word. I'm known as a vacation ownership evangelist, but I'm really a leadership evangelist. So anything I can do to help organizations foster and grow good practices, good performance habits, I'm definitely in. I'm certainly willing to get in and be in touch with everyone.
Well, I've been so fortunate to have you on the show. Folks, if you're looking for a good read, Executive Powers, MJ Tolan, look it up, buy it, read it, and I'll make sure to put all your information at the bottom of the screen and the videos for them to be able to communicate with you. MJ, once again, thank you for your time, for your energy, and for the knowledge that you shared with us. And for all those listening, stay tuned for next week. And until then, as normal, success to you.